There is a group of people alive right now who take no medication, visit no hospitals, and regularly reach 100 years of age with the physical and mental capacity of someone 30 years younger. They are not mythological. They exist in documented communities, studied by researchers from some of the world's leading universities. And the most important thing about them is not how long they live. It is what they drink every single morning, without exception. You have probably been told that aging inevitably means more pills, more appointments, and less of everything you value about your daily life. The people I am about to describe were told no such thing. They simply kept doing what their ancestors had done for 1,000 years, and their cardiovascular systems, their metabolic health, and their cognitive function reflect that continuity in ways that consistently challenge what Western medicine assumed was possible after 70. Today, I am going to show you the 5 compounds that appear with striking consistency in the daily habits of the longest-living, healthiest aging populations on Earth, what modern science has now confirmed about each one, and exactly how to use them starting today. Stay with me because the 5th compound is the one that surprises people most. Its connection to blood pressure and cellular energy is documented in research that only emerged in the past decade, but which these populations have been applying for centuries. I'm Dr. Jake Taylor. Write your country in the comments right now. And if you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. I make these videos every week for people over 60 who want evidence-based health information they can actually use. Let me tell you about Edward. He was 72 and came to my practice frustrated. He had been managing high blood pressure for 6 years. He was on 2 medications. His inflammatory markers were consistently elevated. He exercised moderately. He followed his physician's dietary recommendations. And he felt old in a way that he described as more than just age, a heaviness and fatigue that had settled in over the past 3 years and that no adjustment to his current treatment had moved. When I asked about his dietary habits in detail, one thing stood out. He drank coffee every morning and nothing else until lunch. He had no consistent source of the polyphenol compounds that the populations I study consume daily and that his body had effectively been without for decades. We introduced 4 of the 5 compounds I'm going to describe today, starting with the one with the most immediate impact on his cardiovascular system. At 12 weeks, his inflammatory markers had dropped substantially. His physician had reduced one of his blood pressure medications. His energy in the mornings had returned to something he described as feeling like myself again. He said, "I spent 6 years adding medications. Nobody ever suggested I might be missing something. Today I am going to show you what he was missing, and more importantly, I'm going to show you why these 5 compounds work together in a way that makes none of them as effective in isolation. Here is the concept you need before the 5 compounds make complete sense. Chronic low-grade inflammation is now understood to be the foundational soil in which virtually every major disease of aging grows. Heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cognitive decline, arterial stiffening, joint deterioration. None of these conditions appear suddenly. They develop over years in a biochemical environment of sustained, silent inflammation that most people carry without knowing it, because it produces no acute pain and appears on no standard blood panel until the damage is already advanced. The populations that consistently reach very old age and genuine health are not simply lucky. They are not genetically exceptional in ways that explain the full picture. What they have in common is a daily dietary pattern that contains specific polyphenolic compounds that suppress this chronic inflammatory state at a cellular level. Their bodies are not fighting the same internal fire that most people in modern societies are managing without awareness. Understanding this is the key to understanding why these 5 compounds are not supplements in the conventional sense. They are not patching a specific deficiency. They are maintaining a biological environment in which the diseases of aging have a significantly harder time taking hold. There is a second dimension to why these particular populations age differently that the research has clarified over the past decade. It is not only that they consume anti-inflammatory compounds daily, it is that they have maintained that consumption consistently for decades. The protective effects of polyphenolic compounds are not primarily acute. They are cumulative. Each day of consistent consumption adds a small increment of protection. Each day of absence allows the inflammatory baseline to rise slightly. Over 20 years, the difference between a person who has consumed these compounds daily and one who has not is the difference between two entirely different internal environments, even if their genetics, their weight, and their standard blood work look similar at any given moment. This is why the populations I am about to describe do not look dramatically different from their peers at 60. They look dramatically different at 80 and profoundly different at 90. The divergence is not sudden. It is the compounded result of a consistent daily habit applied over decades. And the most important implication of this is that the time to start is not when the disease appears. The time to start is now, regardless of where you are currently, because every day of consistent consumption is a day that contributes to the cumulative protection that makes the difference visible 20 years from now. Now. The first compound. Oolong tea has been consumed for over 1,000 years in the mountain communities of China and throughout East Asia. It occupies a unique position between green and black tea in terms of its oxidation level, and this position creates a polyphenol profile that does not exist in either form alone. What makes Oolong specifically valuable for cardiovascular health is its concentration of a class of polyphenols that reduce the oxidation of LDL cholesterol. Oxidized LDL is the form that adheres to arterial walls and initiates the plaque formation process that leads to atherosclerosis. Standard LDL measurements on your blood panel do not distinguish between oxidized and non-oxidized LDL, which means most people have no idea how much of the dangerous form is circulating in their system. The polyphenols in Oolong directly reduce this oxidation process. A study conducted in Japan following more than 76,000 participants found that regular Oolong consumers had significantly lower rates of cardiovascular events, including heart attack and stroke, compared to non-consumers, even after controlling for other dietary and lifestyle factors. This was not a small signal. It was a consistent, dose-dependent relationship. Oolong also contains L-theanine, an amino acid that produces a state of calm alertness without the stimulation associated with caffeine alone. L-theanine modulates the stress response by supporting GABA activity in the brain, which has a secondary cardiovascular benefit: reduced cortisol production. Chronic cortisol elevation is one of the primary drivers of the inflammatory state I described above. The practical instruction: 1 to 2 cups of oolong daily, brewed at approximately 85 degrees Celsius, not boiling, which degrades the more delicate polyphenol compounds. Morning or early afternoon. The L-theanine content means it does not interfere with sleep the way coffee can at similar times. Margaret was 67 and had been drinking 4 cups of coffee daily for 30 years. Her cortisol pattern was chronically elevated, her blood pressure required medication, and she described a persistent low-level anxiety that had become so familiar she no longer recognized it as unusual. When she replaced 2 of her daily coffees with oolong over 8 weeks, the shift in her morning cardiovascular readings was measurable enough that her physician noticed at her routine appointment without being told anything had changed. Her resting heart rate had dropped by 7 beats per minute. Her systolic pressure was 4 points lower at morning measurements. She said, "I thought the coffee was just a habit. I did not realize it was part of what was keeping my system in a state of alert all day." The second compound is one that has been in traditional medicine systems across essentially every culture that had access to it for thousands of years: ginger. And the reason it appears so consistently is because its mechanism of action is genuinely difficult to replicate. The active compound in ginger is gingerol, and gingerol operates through a pathway that anti-inflammatory pharmaceutical drugs attempt to replicate at significant cost in side effects. Gingerol inhibits the NF-κB pathway, which is the molecular switch that activates inflammatory gene expression in cells. When NF-κB is active, cells produce pro-inflammatory compounds continuously. When gingerol inhibits this pathway, that production is reduced directly at the source. But the aspect of ginger that receives the least attention relative to its importance is its effect on platelet aggregation. Gingerol inhibits the clumping of blood platelets in a way that reduces clot formation risk without the bleeding risk associated with pharmaceutical anticoagulants. For arterial health in older adults, where the combination of arterial stiffening and platelet activity creates elevated stroke and heart attack risk, this is a clinically relevant mechanism. A research team at the University of Georgia demonstrated that consistent ginger supplementation reduced markers of muscle damage and inflammation after oxidative stress. And separately, clinical trials have documented its effects on fasting blood glucose and insulin sensitivity in individuals with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. The mechanism here involves gingerol's interaction with GLUT4 receptors in muscle tissue, improving glucose uptake independently of insulin signaling. The practical instruction: 1 to 2 grams of fresh or dried ginger daily, brewed as a tea or added to meals. The important thing is consistency. The anti-inflammatory and metabolic effects of ginger are cumulative and require regular daily exposure to maintain their benefit. Let me tell you about Patricia. She was 68 and had been managing what her rheumatologist described as systemic low-grade inflammation for 4 years. Her C-reactive protein was consistently elevated. She had tried multiple dietary interventions with limited sustained effect. When she added fresh ginger tea every morning alongside the oolong she had already incorporated, her CRP dropped by 31% over 12 weeks. Her rheumatologist asked what she had changed. The answer genuinely surprised him. He was not skeptical. He acknowledged the literature. He said he simply had not thought to recommend it directly. The third compound is one whose active molecule has generated more published research in the past 2 decades than almost any other natural compound. Curcumin, derived from turmeric, has over 10,000 peer-reviewed studies examining its biological effects. The headline finding is its anti-inflammatory potency, operating through the same NF-κB pathway as gingerol, but through a different binding mechanism. Together, they produce a synergistic inhibition of this inflammatory switch that neither achieves with the same completeness alone. This is the combinatory wisdom that these populations applied intuitively and that researchers are now documenting biochemically. But the cardiovascular effect of curcumin that most people do not know about is its impact on endothelial function. The endothelium is the single-cell thick lining of your blood vessels. When it functions properly, it regulates vessel dilation and constriction, prevents excessive platelet adhesion, and controls the inflammatory response in vessel walls. When it is damaged or dysfunctional, which happens progressively with age and is accelerated by chronic inflammation, the pathway to atherosclerosis and hypertension opens. A study published in the American Journal of Cardiology found that patients receiving curcumin supplementation after coronary artery bypass grafting had a 65% lower rate of postoperative heart attack compared to those receiving placebo. This is not a marginal effect. It is a result that prompted significant further investigation into curcumin's cardioprotective mechanisms. There is one critical detail about curcumin that determines whether consuming it produces any meaningful effect. Curcumin has very low bioavailability in isolation. The body absorbs only a small fraction of what is consumed. Piperine, the active compound in black pepper, increases curcumin bioavailability by approximately 2,000% when consumed together. Adding a small amount of black pepper whenever you consume turmeric or curcumin transforms its effectiveness from marginal to substantial. William was 71 and had been taking a curcumin supplement daily for 2 years after reading about its anti-inflammatory properties. When I asked about his preparation, he was taking it on its own, mid-morning, without food and without black pepper. His inflammatory markers had not moved meaningfully in those 2 years. When we added black pepper to his turmeric preparation and shifted its timing to with a meal containing healthy fat, which further enhances curcumin absorption, his CRP began declining within 6 weeks. The compound had been there. The delivery mechanism had been wrong. He told me. I had been taking it faithfully and wondering why nothing changed. 2 small adjustments made 2 years of effort finally work. Before I get to the 4th and 5th compounds, I want to stop for a moment. If this is organizing information you have encountered in fragments but never seen clearly connected, subscribe right now. We publish every week, and this is exactly what this channel is for. 3 seconds. Subscribe and let's continue. The fourth compound comes from a flower that was cultivated and consumed for medicinal purposes by ancient Egyptians, West African healers, Ayurvedic practitioners in India, and pre-Columbian communities in the Americas, with no contact between these cultures. That convergence is not coincidence. When populations separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years independently arrive at the same plant, it is because the plant is doing something that observable human health can confirm. Hibiscus, and specifically its anthocyanin content, the compounds responsible for its intense red color and its most clinically documented cardiovascular effects. A study published in the Journal of Nutrition followed hypertensive patients consuming hibiscus tea daily for 6 weeks. Systolic blood pressure decreased by an average of 7.2 millimeters of mercury compared to placebo. This reduction, achieved without side effects, without dependency, and without the sodium-wasting effects of common antihypertensive medications, is clinically meaningful. For reference, a 5 millimeter reduction in systolic blood pressure is associated with a 14% reduction in stroke risk and a 9% reduction in coronary heart disease risk in epidemiological studies. The mechanism involves the anthocyanin's direct effect on the ACE enzyme, the same enzyme targeted by a class of widely prescribed antihypertensive medications called ACE inhibitors. Hibiscus acts as a natural ACE inhibitor without the dry cough that affects a significant proportion of patients on pharmaceutical ACE inhibitors. Hibiscus also contains compounds that inhibit the enzymes responsible for breaking down complex carbohydrates into glucose in the intestine, producing a glycemic blunting effect that slows post-meal blood sugar rises. For anyone managing insulin resistance, this mechanism works complementarily with the gingerol and curcumin effects on glucose metabolism. Dorothy was 74 and had been on an ACE inhibitor for 3 years. She was tolerating it but experienced the persistent dry cough that is the most common complaint with this medication class. When I explained hibiscus's mechanism and the research behind it, and she incorporated 2 cups of hibiscus tea daily under my monitoring, her blood pressure maintained its controlled range. We discussed the possibility of reducing her medication dose with her cardiologist, who agreed to a supervised trial. She is now at half her previous dose with stable readings. She told me, I was managing a side effect of my medication with another medication. I did not know a natural alternative had the same documented mechanism. The fifth compound is the one that consistently produces the most surprise because its mechanism of action was not understood until relatively recently, and its effects are more immediately perceptible than most natural compounds. Beetroot, and specifically its extraordinarily high concentration of inorganic nitrates. When you consume beetroot, the inorganic nitrates it contains are converted by bacteria in your saliva and then by enzymes in your body into nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the primary signaling molecule that causes blood vessel walls to relax and dilate. It was described in a landmark 1998 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine as the fundamental molecule regulating blood vessel tone and blood pressure throughout the body. A single dose of beetroot juice has been demonstrated to reduce systolic blood pressure by up to 10 millimeters of mercury within hours in published research. This is an acute effect that compounds with regular daily use as the body's nitric oxide generating capacity is consistently supported. But the dimension of beetroot's effect that extends beyond blood pressure is its impact on mitochondrial efficiency. The same nitric oxide pathway that dilates blood vessels also increases the efficiency with which mitochondria, the energy-producing structures within your cells, utilize oxygen to generate energy. Research in high-performance athletes demonstrated this effect first, showing that beetroot consumption increased exercise endurance by reducing the oxygen cost of physical work. But the implication for everyday life in adults over 60 is directly relevant. More energy from the same physiological effort, less fatigue from the same daily activity, and faster recovery from exertion. For populations living at altitude, where oxygen availability is reduced and the cardiovascular system works harder at baseline, beetroot's nitrate content provided a mechanism for maintaining physical capacity that would otherwise have been significantly constrained. The populations that used it did not know the term nitric oxide. They knew that certain roots kept people strong and clear through long days. The mechanism was the same. George was 70 and had been declining invitations to walk with friends for 2 years because his energy dropped too quickly. He attributed it to aging. When I introduced the full combination of these 5 compounds, including beetroot powder, in his morning routine, the change in his physical capacity over 8 weeks surprised him and his family. He told me at his follow-up, "I thought I was just old. I did not know I was depleted. Let me now give you the complete practical protocol." The 5 compounds work most effectively as a combined daily routine rather than individually. The anti-inflammatory effects of ginger and curcumin complement and amplify each other through their shared and adjacent mechanisms. The cardiovascular protection of Oolong, Hibiscus, and Beetroot addresses the arterial, pressure, and cellular energy dimensions of heart health simultaneously. Morning. 1 cup of Oolong tea brewed at 85 degrees. Add a 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric and a small pinch of black pepper to any morning food. The piperine in the pepper activates the curcumin that would otherwise pass through without being absorbed. Midday or afternoon, fresh ginger tea. 1 to 2 centimeters of fresh ginger root steeped in hot water for 5 minutes, or 1/2 teaspoon of dried ginger in the same preparation. Evening, hibiscus tea, 2 cups daily. If your blood pressure medication includes an ACE inhibitor, discuss this with your physician before adding hibiscus, as the combined effect may require dose adjustment. Beetroot, 2 to 3 tablespoons of beetroot powder in water or juice daily, or 250 milliliters of pure beetroot juice. The nitrate content is highest in raw or minimally processed forms. Cooking significantly reduces it. One important note about consistency and sequencing. The most common mistake people make when introducing multiple dietary changes simultaneously is attempting to implement all of them on day 1, losing enthusiasm when the adjustment feels overwhelming, and abandoning the effort within 2 weeks. The approach that produces durable long-term results is sequential introduction. Week 1. Add the Oolong tea as a morning replacement for one existing beverage. 1 change. 1 week. Let it become automatic. Week 2. Add the ginger tea in the afternoon. 2 habits now established. Week 3. Add the black pepper with turmeric to 1 daily meal. This requires no additional preparation time. It is a seasoning addition to something you are already eating. Week 4. Add the hibiscus tea in the evening. By this point, the morning oolong and afternoon ginger are established, and the evening slot is open for the new habit. Week 5. Add the beetroot. By this point, the habit architecture is stable, and adding one more element does not feel like an additional burden. This sequential approach does not slow your results. The first compound you add begins working immediately. The full synergistic effect builds as each compound is added, and the habits formed in sequence are significantly more durable than 5 habits introduced simultaneously. The timeline of results. Within 1 to 2 weeks of consistent daily use, most people notice improved morning energy as the nitric oxide pathway is consistently supported. Within 4 to 6 weeks, those monitoring their blood pressure at home typically observe measurable improvement. Within 8 to 12 weeks, inflammatory markers in blood tests begin to reflect the cumulative anti-inflammatory effect of the full combination. None of these compounds replace medication that has been prescribed for a diagnosed condition. If you are currently on antihypertensive medication, blood thinners, or diabetes medication, discuss any dietary additions with your physician before beginning, as the compounds I have described have genuine physiological effects that can interact with existing treatment. You are not behind, you are not broken. The populations that age with genuine health are not biologically different from you in ways that cannot be bridged. They are chemically supported in ways you have not been. That can change today. Helen was 73 and came to my practice after her sister, who had been following this protocol for 18 months, had a cardiovascular checkup that surprised her cardiologist. Her sister's arterial stiffness measurements had improved. Her inflammatory markers were in a range typically seen in people 15 years younger. Helen wanted to understand what her sister had been doing. When I walked her through the 5 compounds and their documented mechanisms, she said something that I have thought about often since. My sister looks like she is aging more slowly than me. We are 2 years apart. I thought that was just genetics. It is not just genetics. It is a daily practice applied over 18 months that created a measurable biological difference between 2 people who started from the same place. That difference is available to you. Starting with the first cup of Oolong tomorrow morning. Tell me in the comments, which of these 5 compounds are you already using, and which one are you going to add first? Have you ever discussed polyphenol intake with your physician? I read every comment, and your answers shape what I cover next. If this video gave you something that changes how you think about what you consume daily, share it right now with someone over 60 who is managing blood pressure, fatigue, or inflammation, and has only ever been offered pharmaceutical solutions. That conversation might be the most useful one they have this year. I'm Dr. Jake Taylor. Subscribe if you have not already. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next video.